welcome back to the Playbook, y'all. We are back for the first time in like a month. It's been a long time since we've gotten to film Playbook. It's our schedule, and then it was spring break, and then Sienna and I were down in Birmingham to cover the tournament. Jacob, I'm sorry we couldn't bring you. Nothing against you, but, so we're back, and a lot has happened in Temple Athletics. We are wrapping up basketball season, well, about as much as we can before it's transfer season. Lacrosse is really, really playing some good ball right now. And, Sienna, you're never going to escape it, but it's spring football season. So we got a full agenda for you guys today. Let's jump right into it. Well, first of all, we're not going to jump right into it. Guys, how we feeling? How we doing today?
Once the caffeine hits, I'll be a little bit better, but for now, I'm surviving until then.
I like it.
I have had an insane amount of no energy today, but I'm going to try to change that right now.
We need the energy today, Sienna. We really need your
so
energy
much.
today. We're going to start, let's jump into it with men's basketball. Kind of wrap up their season. And really, I would say disappointing end of the season for men's basketball, y'all. They ended the year losing 8 of their last 9 games, sliding all the way down to the 10th seed in the American Conference Tournament. And they lost to Florida Atlantic 63-59 in the first round of the American Conference Tournament. They were in that game late. Neither team could really pull away throughout that game. Like, it was very competitive, very high-energy game. But once again, it was kind of Temple's second half issues kind of came to light again, and they had a chance to tie it, I think, with about under 30 seconds left, but Darian Ford lost the ball out of bounds on a potential drive to tie the game with a layup, and FAU made their free throws, and that was that for Temple men's basketball. They finished the year 16-16 record, which might be below our expectations. I personally hit it right on the nose in my basketball preview. I'll shout myself out there. Darian Ford, Aiden Tobias, and Jordan Mason all had really solid years for Temple. Darian Ford was third team all-conference. Jordan Mason really did a good job kind of initiating the offense throughout the year, especially as like a true point guard, which Temple hasn't had in a while. And Aiden Tobias took a major, major jump in his second year. Gavin Griffiths was good throughout the first half of the year, but really struggled in that back half of the year, kind of coinciding with that end-of-year skid. And we saw some flashes from Jemai Felton, Babatunde Duradola in the front court. Guys, just overall, give me your general thoughts from this year. Was this season, look at it overall, throw out the fact they lost 8 of 9 to end the year. Was this, in your opinion, overall a disappointment from your preseason expectations?
I can go first. I think before that losing stretch, I would say no. But that losing stretch, it was kind of a complete collapse of the season. So that kind of makes me change my answer to yes, just because, they impressed me at the beginning of the season. They were moving the ball around. They were communicating. There was multiple people scoring, which are things that, haven't happened in recent years. And I think they were definitely exceeding my expectations at the beginning of the season. But then they kind of fell apart. And so I think it was a little bit of a disappointment just because they couldn't close it out. And then, at the end of the day, if you can't close out games, you can't close out the season, then, you can't really do anything about it.
I agree with that. Jacob?
I think it absolutely was a disappointment, to be so honest. And I think 2 big things happened to kind of contribute to the decline later in the season. One, Jordan Mason got off to such a strong start with the playmaking. And then once teams kind of started guarding him a little bit more aggressively, throwing a little more things at him, the offense kind of started to stall because, again, that was Temple's, lone true playmaker. And Gavin Griffiths, as it is with a lot of volume shooters, second half of the season, he just went cold. And when you combine those 2 things, you'll have those offensive dry spells. You'll have those second half lows. And Sienna, as you're writing about right now, the defensive intensity also in the second half. It just sometimes disintegrates. And I notice a lot of times whenever they would play a team with a great guard, Darian Ford would do a great job on the perimeter. They do some help, but in the second half, it just seems like a guard would go off every single time. And there's no adjustments, and maybe that's because they're tired. Obviously, the lack of depth plagued them a lot this year. Masai Gilliard was their only main contributor off the bench, Babatunde Duradola as well. But when you combine all those things, you get a rocky second half of the season, and that's exactly what you got. And I also say it's a disappointment because we don't know how lucky this team's going to get in the transfer portal. We don't know who's going to enter. We don't know who this team's going to get. And how many times can you kind of strike gold on a Gavin Griffiths and a Darian Ford? Kind of not under-resourced that the school is, but, like, you need to be able to reload, and we just don't know if this team can. So that's why I say a disappointment, because this was your year to win it in a sense.
And to go off of that, Jacob, for me, I mean, I know I predicted this team to only go 16-15 and got that kind of about as right as I could have possibly been. But for me, this is a disappointment because you don't know when the American is going to be this week in basketball again. And this was I think one of the first years the American's only been a one-bid league. And granted, South Florida is I think, an incredibly good team. They hit their stride at the end of the year. I personally have them in my Elite Eight of my March Madness bracket right now. Now, that could change before Thursday. But outside of South Florida, this was a conference that was so wide open. And I think every year it's going to be that way with the transfer portal because the American, in my opinion, is that next up league from the P4 where, like, the P4 players who didn't get a lot of opportunities are going to go down to the American and thrive and then can go back up. And I think year after year we're going to see the American get gutted by the transfer portal. And that could change as different rules get passed and transfer portal changes. We may see more consistency. But this, I think, was one of the worst years overall for basketball for the American in terms of overall talent throughout the league. Throughout top to bottom, we didn't have those really top teams outside of South Florida, which could have opened the door for Temple to be a top 4 team. And the fact that they weren't able to take advantage of that, I think, is what's ultimately going to make this year the biggest disappointment. Because if the American can rebound and be a good basketball conference again, I think people are going to look back at this year and say this was a year that Temple really could have competed in the American because it was a down year. And Temple ultimately could. And it's so tough to predict preseason because there is so much turnover every single year in the American Conference. We'll probably see it again this offseason. And Jay said it's impossible to hit on everyone in the transfer portal. Like, South Florida's gotten lucky because they hit on Isaiah Nelson and Wes Ennis. And Temple kind of got pretty lucky with Darian Ford and Gavin Griffiths and Jordan Mason. Like, you're not going to hit on everybody again. And I think for me that's where the biggest disappointment comes in. Is now you head into the offseason where Adam Fisher really has to turn around his roster pretty significantly again. They're losing 6 seniors, namely Darian Ford, your leading scorer, but you also lose Jordan Mason, your starting point guard. Messiah Gilliard, who was that kind of glue guy, dirty work guy off the bench. A.J. Smith, who only played in the first 8 games for undergoing a shoulder injury. Mohamed Keita, your bench big man, and then walk-on Connor Gall might be redshirting, might not be. He didn't really play that much outside of garbage time. So you got to replace at least 2 starters minimum, barring the transfer portal, and one of your main bench guys. And you obviously have to aim to retain Aiden Tobias, which you did last year. That might be harder this year. I think you watch Aiden Tobias, and he's probably a P5 talent. Gavin Griffiths, we played at the P5 level before. He's probably a P5 talent. And you hope to retain both of Jemai Feltz and Babatunde Duradola, but at least one would be huge because it is so difficult to get big men in the transfer portal because they are so expensive with NIL. Guys, you look at what this roster is going to lose, and obviously, players could transfer in or out. I'm not going to ask you to predict who is going to transfer out because that's just impossible. Everybody could or nobody could. You never know with that. But what are you looking for them based on the players they're losing? What do you think that they need to focus on adding in the transfer portal this offseason?
Point guard. This is the first year in a couple seasons that they've had a true point guard, and I think that was the biggest difference from this year to last year. It was they actually have someone setting up the offense, and it's somebody different than the person who's being looked at to score all the points. It never works when the leading scorer is also relied on to facilitate the offense. It's just too much on them, especially if Temple's issues of kind of lacking depth continues. I don't think that's going to work. And I know that earlier this season, someone asked Adam Fisher about Jordan Mason after one of the games, and he was like, we're going to be looking in the transfer portal to get some more point guards. I think that needs to be the biggest point of emphasis, is you need someone who can handle pressure and who can set up the offense and get the other scorers going.
I think for me, point guard, of course, but I think they need a center, because we've seen this team just get destroyed in the paint. And while Jemai Feltz and Baba kind of offer different things with their skill sets, this team has really just lacked a true 5. And I know that's hard to come by, but at least get someone with some more size, a rim protector. They've always been missing a rim protector. They've had a lot of quality perimeter defenders this year, but like they really miss somebody who can kind of help in the gaps and kind of anchor the defense from the rim. And I think that's going to be their biggest priority.
And before we close out men's basketball here, I want to look at Adam Fisher, Temple's men's basketball coach. Thanks, Jacob. Like our copywriter Ryan always says, right? Like people don't know what you're talking about. So I'm doing the same thing here. Shout out Ryan. But we're now Adam Fisher just completed year 3 here at Temple. And in 3 years, he's gone 16-20 in year 1. The year he made the run to the conference tournament final as an 11 seed. Year 2, they went 17-15. It's a pretty significant improvement, but they lost in the first round at Tulsa. Now this year, 16-16, and another first round loss. So back-to-back years without winning a conference tournament game. We really didn't see that improvement from year 2 to year 3, which I feel like is a pretty important year for improvement in college basketball, especially for coaches and program building. And now we know the fan base might not be pleased, especially with the historical aspect of Temple being one of the most historically great programs in college basketball. The expectations that fans have and the expectations that come with being at Temple for basketball. Although it might not be as glamorous as it once was, this is still probably considered a basketball school. Guys, as Adam Fisher gets ready to enter this offseason, obviously a big offseason for him, I don't think any of us think he should be fired this offseason. I think if that was the case, it probably would have already happened because we've already seen programs who are eliminated from the NCAA tournament letting go of their head coaches. Is next year a make-or-break year for Adam Fisher? And obviously it's impossible to predict what's going to happen next year, but what do you think you need to see from this program next year to warrant Adam Fisher retaining his job for a 5th season?
I think, well, first to just add a little more context, in the end of November, it was reported that he got a 2-year contract extension. The university hasn't confirmed it yet, but it's like it was reported that. I think it's a little tough to say if it's a make or break year for him next year, just because the way I look at it is college athletics are so different now. Like with the roster overturn, like I don't know if it's fair to, okay, hold on. It is fair to ask for improvement every season, but with basically a completely new roster, I don't know how fair that ask is to like some extent. But I think he needs to not have another really long losing stretch like he did this year and like he did last year. And both of those came near the end of the season. So I think for him to not get fired, I think he needs to not have those long losing stretches that kind of ultimately have ended their season short.
I think it should be, but first I just want to say he, in his few years, he has dealt with a lot of expletive. But I mean, even this season, Bill Courtney passed away. The C.J. Hines thing, AJ Smith season-ending injury. Those are 2 really important guards in your depth, and also a very important figure in the program and just in college basketball. And that's a lot to process. But the other 2 seasons have been kind of a roller coaster for him as well. And I think with that, he hasn't really ever gotten a fair shot in a sense. But at the same time, this team was riding high this season. They were almost at the 2nd seed in the conference. And then they just fell apart, like we said. And what that came down to, again, was second halves. And when that keeps happening again and again and again, it just kind of shows an inability to make an adjustment, an inability to adjust in game plans. And I think that matters regardless of who is on your team and what's going on player-wise. And that's why I think it is. I just think above all, Colin, to answer your question, this team needs to see consistency. And that doesn't mean you have to win every single game, because that's just not realistic. But, you can't go on these long losing stretches. And, you can't go on a 7-game winning streak and then replace by losing 8 of your last 9. Obviously, there's going to be highs and lows, but, it can't be this up and down.
Can't be the extremes of the highs and lows.
I can't agree more with both of you guys. You both, Sam, Jacob, the losing streaks. Jacob, he has not really gotten a fair shot through a full season. There has been something each year, and I think especially this year, one of his best friends in Bill Courtney passes away in January, and 2 of his main guards, like you said, aren't available for basically the entire season. And last year, Jamal Mashburn Jr. has the injury. Like, it goes so on and so forth. But the losing streaks for me in February, like, that's inexcusable year in and year out. Like, that shouldn't happen 3 straight years. So, for me, I think it is a bit of a make or break year. And it's nothing against, like, Adam Fisher. And he has dealt with a lot of, unfortunate circumstances. But I think in this age of college athletics, winning is also expected sooner with the transfer portal. And maybe that's more so for football, but I think as, 17, 16 win seasons pile up and, keep having the opportunity in the transfer portal, winning might be expected sooner than 10 years ago when you had the opportunity to build a program where, like, Zion Stanford still would have been here and, other guys who transferred out wouldn't have left because that wasn't a thing 10 years ago. So it's difficult to kind of quantify my own question, but I think I agree that I would say it's more of it is a make or break year for Adam Fisher in year 4 next year. That's kind of all for men's basketball. Overall, a bit of a disappointing season. I'm sure we'll be back talking about them as players enter the transfer portal and as they get transfers. It's going to be a busy month of April. As John Rothstein says, we don't sleep till May. But let's move on to women's basketball now. The bit of also a disappointing note. I think a bit of a more disappointing note is the women's basketball team. They ended the regular season strong, 2 wins in their last 3 games, including an 84-56 win against Florida Atlantic to end the year. Really, really strong win, and entered the year entered the conference tournament as the 7th seed. It beat Tulane in round 1, 86-77, and a bit of an ugly overtime win. Really, I think only played a quarter and a half of good basketball, and they led by 12 to enter the 4th quarter, blew it, and then went on a run in overtime to pull out the win. And then lost to the 6th seed UTSA 59-51 in round 2. UTSA who ended up winning the entire conference tournament, upsetting Rice. They now get to play UConn in round 1. That one might not be too pretty. No disrespect to UTSA there, but UConn is undefeated.
UConn is insane.
Overall, in terms of where this team was preseason, both projected by us and projected by the conference, disappointing to say the least. They were picked to finish 4th in the American Conference this year. They were coming off back-to-back 20-win seasons. You return so many solid contributors and add what seems to be pretty good fits on this team in the preseason, and ultimately it just never really gelled this year, and they ended up going 15-17 and just had season-long issues that never got better. The depth, the offensive inconsistencies, the defense regressed this year. Confidence wasn't there, and it was the same things that Diane Richardson would say, game in and game out in our postseason in our post-game press conferences, and they just never really saw them get fixed, and it resulted in their worst season in a couple years. So, guys, it's kind of overall thoughts from this year for this women's basketball team that seemed like it was on the verge of taking the next step. Oh boy.
So I've written about this team at length for a good few months now, and like you said, Colin, it's just been the same exact things, and to me that just says that they weren't really connected in a way that translates to winning. And that kind of goes back to what Diana Fisher said about just the lack of intensity overall. And not to trace it back to the men's team, but this year's women's team is an example of a transfer portal horror story. You bring in Brianna Mead to be the secondary ball handler, and it just didn't happen. That's the kind of stuff that can hurt teams in general in college basketball. But to just trace it back in, it was a tough year. The offense, the equal opportunity offense that Diane Richardson has wanted to implement throughout her time here, just didn't really happen that way. And Kayla Turner, she had a great season, led the conference in points per game. But what kind of happened was everything kind of got so focused around her. And as a result, the offense kind of stagnated when teams adjusted, because a lot of the times Temple would have a set play for her or Tristan out of a pick and roll. And when a team got that, they had nothing to fall back on, and then they would just chew out the shot clock and it would just end in a bad shot. And what you see from that is when they're struggling, they don't have the bench depth to, support them. And that's felt like it was a storyline every game. The defense kind of came and went. I think, Diane kind of coined this phrase, spicy defense, for those who didn't know, and that was just for energy and effort. And we saw it, but it was so predicated on turning teams over. And when you kind of have that, there's downsides to it. You can kind of get caught up in rotations with completed open shots, and we kind of saw that too many times. Just the team lacked so much consistency on both ends of the floor. You mix that with the poor depth, and just not really ever being able to kind of connect, and you get a season like this.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on a lot of it. I think the only thing I'm going to add is they were just, they were never consistent. They would sometimes start games really, really slow, have a fantastic second quarter, and then just kind of die out again. Or they would start the game really strong and then wouldn't be able to close it out. It was just, it never felt like they put together a full 40 minutes of, intense, consistent, aggressive basketball.
I completely agree with both of you guys. And this was a team that I think we all picked in basketball preview to win 20 games, to I think lose in the conference tournament final, and ultimately they didn't really get close. They dealt with some injuries throughout the year. Tristan Taylor missed 4 games in the end of non-conference play. Savannah Curry missed 4 games to start conference play. They didn't have Anastasia Bolanova all year, who they were very high on, and I think would have played a pretty important role off the bench, but she tore her ACL before the season, and you don't have her all year. So just it was overall a really disappointing year for the women's team. But they enter this is kind of like Adam Fisher. This is a really important offseason for Diane Richardson, but more so from the fact that they could bring back every single player. They had no seniors this year, so the younger team, but no seniors. They still had experience because Tristan Taylor's been playing for all 3 years. Kayla Turner's, Jalissa Molina all have that kind of experience. But they had to really bring everyone back. Now, that is essentially impossible in today's era of college basketball. You have to assume at least 2 or 3 players are going to enter the portal. Now, again, I'm not going to ask you guys to predict who's entering the portal because that's just – it could be everybody. It could be nobody. They could bring everybody back. But assuming that at least a couple players enter the portal and they have some scholarships to fill, what do you want to see Diane Richardson add this offseason to kind of help right the wrongs and bring everything kind of more back together like it was the last couple of years?
Wings.
I agree. I agree.
I truly think it's as simple as that. I mean, Jalissa Molina and Savannah Curry has some flaws. Overall, it's a really strong front court. So what this team was kind of missing was just wings who can kind of play that 3-and-D role. Savannah Curry, Colin, as you kind of wrote about a few weeks ago, she kind of developed later in conference play as a three-point shooter, but again, it just wasn't really there consistently. And you can kind of see how this team really just needed those kind of wings to step up, especially with what I mentioned that Diane wants to do defensively, which is just force turnovers, play hounding perimeter defense. And Sav was kind of the only player on that team to really do so. The bench didn't really have one. Drew Alexander was kind of the only productive reserve. And, when her three-point shot wasn't falling, I should say, she didn't really offer too much. And that was kind of the thing. And so if they have those, I think it'll be huge. Because, could you imagine if they had a player like Sav coming off the bench and she wasn't starting caliber, more of a polished wing in the starting lineup? I think we could be looking at maybe not a conference championship, but definitely a little bit more better results. So, yeah.
And I want to add on top of that, the last 2 years when they won 20-plus games, on the wing they had Tiara East and Tariana Gary, who both were excellent offensive players and excellent defensive players. And Savannah Curry was coming off the bench last year in that role. And it was only kind of one true guard starting that backcourt. Now it's switched up a little bit, and they had 2 smaller guards and Sav on the wing and 2 bigs. And, it did not go as well. So, Jacob, I completely agree with you. That's what I would have said as well, is that you look at the success they had with Tariana Gary and Tiara East the last couple of years, and you need that on the wings again, I think. Santa?
I was also going to say wings, so.
Looks like we're all in agreement they need some wings. We can move on. So, again, with women's basketball, we'll close the door for now, but transfer season, you never know who's going to leave, who they're going to bring in. So this won't be the last time we talk about basketball, but games are done until November. Well, let's move over to lacrosse, guys. Again, this is a team that, last time we talked to you guys almost a month ago, I think more than a month ago, actually, this team was 3-0. And we were like, all right, like we said, they could be pretty good. They were off to a strong start. Oh, man, did they build on that 3-0 start. The Owls started 8-0. It was their best start since 1988 when they went undefeated and won the national championship. And it was highlighted by a 14-9 upset of number 17 Penn on February 25th, their first win over a ranked opponent since 2021. Now, they have dropped back-to-back games to Rutgers and South Florida. South Florida was their American Conference opener, but each loss only came by 1 goal. So they were still competitive in those losses. And the South Florida game, I think, really came down to kind of the last couple minutes or so. Again, we look at kind of last time, Lexi Culp, Amelia Wright, Sabrina Martin, Sarah Gowan have all been so impressive on offense. Lexi Culp has, I think, the second most points in the American Conference. Amelia Wright leads the team in goals. Sabrina Martin is built on her offensive breakout from last year. And then in goal, we've seen Riley. I think our biggest question we last scored was the goalkeeping, was what this team's going to do. We've seen Riley Hiroshko really step up and grab the kind of goalkeeper role. She just won goalkeeper of the week despite the loss to South Florida. I think she's had double-digit saves in 3 or 4 games. She's been really, really impressive in goal, which is what we want to see from this team. But, guys, in American Conference play, every game is just uber important. You don't play a lot of them. The teams are really good. Only the top 4 make it to the conference tournament. How do they maintain this success in American Conference play when every game is just so important to your postseason chances?
I think the key is going to be a little bit more defensive improvement. I think their offense is really good. Their game against USF was the first game all season where no Owl has scored at least 3 goals. Okay, and 3 Owls finished with 2 goals. So they were still scoring. A lot of people were scoring a lot still, but this was the first game where someone didn't record a hat trick. But I think defense is going to be the key. You mentioned their 2 losses were both only by 1 goal. Riley earned goalkeeper of the week, had 11 saves. I think the defense in front of her needs to be a little bit quicker. I've seen them kind of be late in some coverages. But I think relieving some pressure off Riley can help them maintain their hot start to the season.
I agree. Jacob, anything to add?
I can try.
Go for it.
Yes, and to build off what you said, I covered their game against Rutgers a few weekends ago, and kind of like you said, the defense, Rutgers was hounding Riley a lot because, they didn't really have players staying in front of their assignments. Rutgers found a lot of gaps, and that was kind of prevalent, it seemed like, in the South Florida game, too. But, also, starting off 8-0, the team's obviously bound to lose and hit a lose. There's going to be highs and lows. So I think an important thing for them is kind of just, sticking with it. Don't let them lose confidence because, like you both mentioned, both of those losses were within 1 goal. Anything could have decided. And you could also look back to the Towson game. They were down 5-4 overtime and won. It could very easily be going the same or a different way, and we're talking about this team being 10-0. So just, kind of maintaining confidence and just keeping up the offense.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a really exciting team for Temple Athletics, especially considering kind of most of the other sports had disappointing years that kind of fell below expectations. Being able to see this lacrosse program out like this is encouraging just for Temple in general. And I mean, they're going to need that confidence for these next 2 games because they play at East Carolina this coming Saturday and then at James Madison, the reigning conference champions, next Saturday. 2 of the best teams in the conference. Really going to kind of test to see what Temple's made of. They really can't afford to start 0-3 in American Conference play, especially because I think you only play 7 games in conference play. So starting 0-3 is no matter how well you start, starting 0-3 is going to be a tough hole to crawl out of to make the conference tournament. So those are the next 2 games. But, yeah, Temple Lacrosse is really, really kind of shining some light right now. Sienna, it's your favorite sport again.
You actually wrote that down. That is actually in your notes.
That is on my script. Is Sienna, as we mentioned at the outset, Sienna, you will never escape football talk.
And Sienna, before we go, I have a question. Just heading into spring practice, what coverages do you want to see Temple execute defensively?
Dude, you're so funny if you think I know football coverages. Okay.
Sienna, you're not gonna, this spring football is gonna be a conversation for the rest of the year. So
hey, I was at practice today for an hour.
And that leads us perfectly into it because it's spring football season and spring practice time. We're every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday now until April 9th is open to the media for us to be able to watch Temple and then talked to Casey Keeler, selected players, position coaches afterwards. Concludes with the spring game on April 11th. And spring football, spring practice is always an intriguing time because you get to see, what Temple was able to bring in the offseason. They brought in they brought in a lot of freshmen. A handful of them enrolled early, so they could be here for the spring. And then they brought in a lot of transfers. They had to fill some holes, especially on defense. But, of course, the biggest thing that everyone kind of cares about right now is the quarterback battle. You graduate Evan Simon, who had a great year, and Giovanni McCoy, who backed him up, and you bring in Jackson Smolik from Penn State and Johnny Shepard from Washington State. Two guys that really don't have a lot of experience at the Division I level. Neither really played that much. But they're two guys that have played at Power 4 schools before. And kind of the spring is going to be, I think a lot of people are going to be watching them as maybe one of them could potentially grab that starting role early. They're joined by two incoming freshmen who enrolled early in Brody Norman and Brady Palmer. Guys, just kind of a quick question here. Obviously, the quarterback battle is the most intriguing. Do you think either freshman could maybe push for, maybe an extra look at starting job, maybe a chance at earning some snaps? Obviously, spring football, it's kind of really difficult to tell, but, do you think there's a chance there?
I mean, I think so, especially this early into spring ball. I think everything's up in the air right now, and especially since Jackson Smolik and
Johnny Shepard,
thank you. They don't have much experience. Like, it's not like they have that edge over the freshmen. So I really think, it could be a possibility.
It's kind of built off what Sienna said. I think it's completely possible that, everyone's in contention because you look back to even last year, Giovanni McCoy and Simon, two seniors, we didn't know who the starting quarterback was going to be until 30 minutes before kickoff against UMass in week 1. So I think especially kind of like you said, at this stage of spring ball, everything is on the table, but I do think Johnny Shepard and Jackson are absolutely the top two candidates. It's just kind of a matter of them probably battling it out.
And obviously, again, everyone cares about the quarterback battle, but there are plenty of other position battles on this roster starting in the spring. Again, those become more intense and more defined in the fall once you get closer to the season, but spring gives you an early chance to look at what they have there. And there's a lot of position battles on this team, a lot of them on defense where they graduated a lot of talents. You have really a whole new defensive line. There's new edge rushers. You have a pretty rebuilt cornerback room as well. Guys, outside of the quarterback battle, what kind of position groups or position battles are you most intrigued to look out for the next 3 or 4 weeks here during spring camp?
Do you want to go first since he was talking about defense?
No, I will. I was just pointing at you as a joke. But, Colin, you just said mine, and that's the cornerback position. Obviously, Temple, like you said, had a lot of turnover. Ben Oswege, Jalen Castleberry, they're no longer with the team. Obviously, haven't graduated. And the big issue with the defense last year was sometimes the secondary, but also just that third corner position. And now the players who have played that position are going to kind of be in the lead in Denzel Chavis and Adrian Lang. And now they'll kind of need a third corner again, in a sense. And they did bring in some new guys. Asa Locks, Nikhil Lawrence from JUCO, Bryson Goodwin switched from wide receiver to corner for this coming season, and also Earl Culp returning. So just kind of looking to see all of them battle for that spot. And just I'm probably predicting a bunch of guys to kind of get a nod for that third role because it's just so open at this point.
I agree with you, Jacob. Sienna?
I'm going to go with the running back room. Temple lost Jay Ducker, who was with Casey Keeler for the last 2 years, one season at Sam Houston, and then he followed him to Temple. He was really the Owls' go-to guy last year. Hunter Smith and Kevion Mason got a good amount of time last year and kind of proved themselves as people who can come in, have a good run. But I'm just interested to see what other transfers or freshmen are going to make a name for themselves in spring ball.
And Sienna, that's the one I would have said as well if I had my first pick, because I'm also R.J. Blunt had a ridiculous senior year of high school at, sorry if I mispronounced this, New Jersey natives, Pennsauken High School. He had a ridiculous year. They are very high on him. The staff is. But, yeah, you mentioned Kevion Mason came on strong at the end of the year as kind of an explosive guy. Hunter Smith showed what he can do. He's a very explosive back. So, with you, Sienna, I'm gonna go, guys. I'm gonna go with the defensive line because it is just such a new group. They lose guys like Sekou Chroma and Alan Hay and Demerick Morris. You have a lot of open snaps down there. They brought in some transfers. They brought in some freshmen. But you're going to have a lot of new defensive linemen down there. And I'm very curious to see who can kind of step up and take on those, like, main defensive tackle roles, defensive end roles, kind of be able to be up there and stuff the run. I think that's the one that I'm going to look out for probably the most. And then just one other spring football note, this Thursday is going to be the Temple's Pro Day as well. We're going to see, we haven't gotten the official list yet, but most seniors are going to be participating, like Evan Simon, Giovanni McCoy, Kajaya Holloway might. We might see some of those defensive linemen like Alan Hayes, Sekou Chroma, Demerick Morris. So chance to maybe see some Owls try to make a name for themselves for a potential NFL shot. Cam Stewart probably might have the best chance at making the NFL. He had a strong start to the year. So stay tuned for some spring football coverage. We'll try to get out as many practices as possible and maybe keep updating you guys on what we're seeing from Edward Olson Hall.
Hopefully I'll be available. I am going to be available this time to cover this event.
What event?
Pro Day.
Mm-hmm.
Pro Day. Oh. Stay tuned for Jacob's recap of Pro Day and maybe a future story about who raised their stock from me. You never know.
Nothing from me.
To close it out here, let's jump into kind of a recap of the rest of the non-rev sports games. It's been a while since we've talked to you guys, so we've seen a lot kind of happen. And starting with fencing, again, we keep talking about consistent program, great program. Finished year 26-11, 30th straight NIFWA title. I'm going to mispronounce this name, and I'm sorry in advance. Alexandra Papatropoulou had a really impressive year for Temple. She finished 4th at the Mid-Atlantic and South Regionals for the Sabre Group. Renee Oyman, and I'm going to mispronounce this name too, Anais Wanji finished top 10 for foil. Temple sent no fencers to the NCAA championships. The first time in a few years. Ana Novo Salcelvo went the last 4 years, but they sent no one this year. Overall, it's just another strong year from Temple fencing. Temple gymnastics getting ready for the East Atlantic Gymnastics League finals coming up, I think, this Saturday. They're 9-20 on the season, but they just had a season high score at the Maryland meet on March 7th. So can you see them?
And they just had their season high score on their vault in the George Washington meet to close out the regular season.
Thank you, Sienna. See, so just like maybe a record that might look poor, it's not like other sports where it's all based on record. You see them continue to get better, especially right as they get ready to enter EAGLs. Men's tennis is now 4-6 after starting 0-4, and women's tennis is 5-5. So it looks like Jeff Brandis has both tennis programs continuing to go on the up and up and keep getting better. Golf has its spring season started up. They finished 11 out of 18 in their first competition, and then 13th out of 15th, 15th out of 15 out of 15, and are on day 3. It's probably over by now.
I think last time I checked, they were 12th, and I believe the event had ended at that point. 12th out of 15.
12th out of 15 at the ECU Intercollegiate at Brook Valley competition. And rowing and crew are getting ready to start their spring seasons, I think, next weekend. So some more sports to look forward to. So that's all the Temple athletics we had from you guys. Say again, pretty full episode. It's been a long time since we've gotten to break stuff down, but basketball season's over. Spring football's in swing. Lacrosse is looking to make a push for, a return to the postseason. That's all we had. Sienna, where can we find the social medias for Temple TTN Sports?
You can get everything on Instagram at ttn.sports. You can get everything at Twitter at ttn_sports.
And you can catch all of our coverage on our website for the rest of this year and more at temple-news.com. Sienna and Jacob, that's temple-news.com. Thank you guys for tuning in.